You can see here how the utility map of the union looks like. Again, assuming our initial point is A. If initial points moves, then I mean this whole curve will move up or down, basically. The main point here is, if it is at point A, the main variable that becomes important for the union has become the wage, because rather they want the wage of the existing employment to increase. So you see the utility curves move more up than to the right. On the other hand, here the most important variable becomes the employment. Now, of course, it doesn't want employment to increase, but rather it wanted to not to decrease. So changes in employment level affect the utility level much more. Here, changes in the wage level affects the utility level more, which means you see the utility curves are moving more to left rather than to down, basically, because as I said, when you decrease the employment level, utility level decreases more. Here, when you move up, utility level increases more compared with the case when you move to the right. And these are the demand curves. Demand curves are usually downward slope, and they are likely to intersect at the point at which the slope of the independence curve transit from a high slope to the low slope. So CAB is kind of considered as a contract curve of the union, basically. But this is just the contract curve of the union for this particular demand curve. If demand curve shape change, actually, it is not necessarily. I think it's not necessarily the contract curve always, but for most demand curves, fairly you can say that CAB is a contract curve, and in your book it is considered as a contract curve. On this graph, you see the indebtedness curve of the companies, basically, and it looks a little bit different from the previous graph, where you were seeing the wage level. Here, actually, wage level can be equated to the value of the average value of the product produced by the company. I mean, here we say product, and pretty much what we are measuring is the average product, but we are not measuring product in terms of actual number of the products produced, but rather according to the revenue brought by the product. So this is labor, and ARP curve is basically representing average revenue of per worker for different employment levels. But as you employ more workers, initially workers become more productive, so average revenue per worker increases. But after a certain point, basically the productivity level of the workers starts to fall. As a result, average revenue of the workers starts to fall down. So this is average revenue per worker without just as you earn the money after you sell what the workers have produced, before you give workers any money. And all of these curves, ANRP1, ANRP2, ANRP3, assume certain levels of profit. And if you produce, if you basically have a certain amount of profit, let's say $1,000, then when you subtract from the total revenue the $1,000, this will be the average net revenue product, basically. So you pay wage from the remaining money. I mean, if you pay if you get profit as yourself, basically the remaining revenue earned by the workers is logically, if other costs are negligible, given to the workers. So in that case, the points on these lines will represent the wage level, basically. If you have a certain amount of profit, for example, $1,000 fixed, then the wage you can pay for the workers increase first as productivity of workers increase, and then it starts to decrease. But the top point from ARP curve and ANRP curve are different. Why it is so? It is because when you want to earn a fixed amount of profit, for example, $1,000, when you have only 2 workers, that means you should earn from each worker $500. So the difference between 2 curves is large here. But when you have 1,000 workers, in that case, you just need to get $5 per worker. I mean, the difference gets smaller. So the fact that this burden of profit on workers gets smaller continues to increase the relative net revenue level, even after the productivity of workers get negative, before productivity decrease becomes the dominant variable and starts to decrease the ANRP curve. So at some point, even though productivity decrease has a negative effect on average net revenue, the positive effect of the decreasing burden of profit is dominant and increasing the net revenue level. But after a certain point, as I said, the effect of decreasing productivity will become dominant. When you increase the profit level, you got to a lower curve, for example, ANRP2 curve. Now, I mean, the wage level or net revenue level at each employment level is lower, and you reach to the top point at a point further right. Why it is so? Because now, since the net burden is much larger, its effect stays longer dominant than the first case. So, for the company, basically, ANRP curves represents the utility, the independence curves, and as you go down, you get a higher level of utility as a company, or higher level of profit. You might express it also in that way. And if wage is constant, I mean, in that case, you must say wage will be the average net revenue when you get out the burden of profit. The company will always want to operate at the top point. Why? Because if wages, let's say, fixed, then rather it want to get the maximum to reach to the highest ANRP curve possible at that wage level, and a horizontal curve will intersect the ANRP curve, the lowest ANRP curve, at its top point, because if it intersects at its top point, you cannot go down. Well, in other words, taking the profit into account, I mean, the company would want to operate at the point where net revenue is highest, basically, for the workers, basically. So, well, here you can see, basically, I mean, the two curves brought together. UU is the utility curve of the union, and ANRP curve represents the utility curve of the company, and demand curve actually represents, I mean, the MRP curve, marginal revenue product curve, basically. That's but basically that is combination of the top points of the ANRP curves of the company, and as long as wage is fixed and the company is only able to set an employment level, it will always choose a level of employment on D1 curve. Well, here you can also see what will happen if suddenly basically the productivity of the workers increase, or maybe even some input cost, which has effect also on profit, has decreased. Well, as a result, ANRP curve has shifted basically. Well, in this case, if we assume that this ANRP2 curve represents as much utility level as the ANRP1 curve, well, we might say that if we move along to UU curve and go to F, well, we will have a utility. I mean, we will have a utility level which is same for the both union and the company. So at F, our utility level remains basically the same, assuming of course the same as A, assuming of course basically the utility, the ANRP curve of the company has shifted. That's why. So at A now our company will have a higher utility level. So if we start from the F point, point F of bargaining, if the union is fully aware of this new advantage the company gets, now for the union basically, well, as long as you are above or on the right side of the utility curve, you increase your basically you increase your utility as a union, and for the company, as long as you are below the ANRP curve, you increase the utility, the profit level of the company. So between points, well, assuming that D2 is a combination of the points at which well, when union sets a wage level, the company gets highest profit level. Well, the bargaining is likely to take place at some point between E and C. And as you get closer to E, basically, the union gets a higher utility level. And as you get closer to C, now the company will get a higher utility level. So if the wage is the same at level G, well, union will get a higher utility level. Why? Because the company will increase the employment level in that case. That will give a higher utility level for the company, for the union, basically. I don't want to go detail into R actually. As I said, I mean, because the specific preferences of the union, the idea is the contract will be somewhere at the R curve. So in that case, you will get contract at D. But I think that claim itself is a little bit controversial, so I'm not going into detail of that claim. But if you are interested, you can look further information on this. But I will talk to you on something other than this, which is also very interesting. Up to this point, we have assumed that the union can only bargain for wage. Actually, if you look to this small area, and that's before the productivity of the company has increased. So we are still at an NRP curve and UU curve. You can see here there is a whole area where the utility of both the company and the union can be better off. But in order to be able to go to this area, union and the company should be able to bargain not only for wage but also for the employment level. So when we zoom to that area, You see like something like this. So A was our initial point in this case, which you might assume is the top point. So we will continue.